I bet you know at least several games that can be considered offensive today. Postal 2, the game where you have to piss on people and use cats as a gun silencer. Manhunt with its romanticization of violence, or Atari porn. I don't think I even have to comment on this one. Well, imagine we had an adventure game in Russia that brought all the above together inside it, except animal abuse, I think, and seasoned by the constant drug usage by most of the characters in it. And it was not only sold officially in every other video game store, but even was one of the most commercially successful Russian PC games in the history of Russian game dev.
Intrigued? Well, hello my friends, my name is Victor and you're watching the Russian Video Game Comrade Show. Stay a while and listen.
Russia of the 90s was really an odd place to be. The smell of freedom spread all over the country, which was totally closed from all the outer world just several years ago. Western goods flooded the Russian market, McDonald's, KFCs, and a lot of other fast food restaurants opened throughout the major cities. And of course, computer and video games started to become a real thing, just like in all the other world. And where the computer and video games are, there also will be those who want to profit on them one way or another. The most obvious way is piracy, of course. But this is not our topic today. The other, legal way is video games magazines. There were quite a lot of Russian computer magazines through the 90s and 2000s, and one of the most uncommon among them is Hacker magazine, published since 1999. Despite the flashy name of this magazine, it was devoted not so much to hacking as to issues of administration, programming, and information security. But since it was essentially written by PC geeks for PC geeks, its mood was quite hooligan. In the 90s, hooliganism, both ethical and not so ethical, was of a romantic nature in Russia. It's not for nothing, the second largest city in Russia, St. Petersburg, acquired the nickname Gangster Petersburg that time.
And the Hacker magazine became very popular in Russia too, mostly among the hooligan PC geeks.
At first, Hacker was just another PC games magazine, reviewing video games in its own obscure way. But just several issues later, game reviews were replaced with the articles on software. And as you can see from the magazine's name, not always legal software. You could find their basic articles on system administration or a simple guide for a user to set up a spam email software and so on. But through the years, Hacker became an iconic magazine for those who really wanted to achieve something in system administration, and from year to year it grew in its professionality along with its readers.
And among those involved, there is even an opinion that this was the magazine that made IT professions popular in Russia.
But one thing remained the same from the very first till the very last issue in 2015. It's hooligan, offensive, homophobic, and inappropriate mood. Throughout the issues, you could find the articles on IT way to dump a girlfriend, making of a top prank, becoming a real man. This one is really funny, by the way. Basically, it suggests you to delete Windows and install Unix or Linux. But the main star in the humor section of Hacker magazine was a person called Danya Shepovalov. He wrote quizzes where you had to decide how much of a scumbag you are, picking out whether to perform sexual intercourse with a donkey or punch an old lady in public transport. And he wouldn't take no for an answer.
I don't really want to translate the original text of these quizzes for you. They are really awful and offensive.
And aside from the quizzes, there also were dirty fanfics starring famous fictional characters, advice on deleting Windows system folder on every computer you see, and so on. But you have to understand that all of these weren't supposed to offend anyone at all back then. It was just casual hooligan humor back in the day, and to be honest, a lot of people liked it.
It's history now.
And as you could already figure out, one day all of these became so popular, Hacker magazine greenlighted the game written by Danya. And this is the game I'm gonna tell you about today. Its name is Nuclear Titbit.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Акакий Сигизмундович, что вы здесь делаете?
О, Антоша, а я здесь отдыхаю. Как и ты вот решил в Питер смотаться на выходные. Хороший город.
Ignoring all the controversy stuff we will discuss further, Nuclear Titbit is a point-and-click adventure game set in the gangster Petersburg in 2003. It is a mix of a drugged Leisure Suit Larry from Sierra stuffed with crazy puzzles non-Russian gamers would hardly figure out. Remember the monkey wrench puzzle from Monkey Island 2 if you aren't American? And Gore from Digifex Harvester. Maybe this mix is the main reason the game became one of the most known Russian adventure games here. And it has so much grotesque and craziness in it that it's quite strange to get to the bottom of the game design or its technical solutions. But you're watching a video game review, so I totally will. So, excuse me, in today's review, I will not only make fun of the Nuclear Titbit and facepalm at some of its moments, but also sometimes be indignant at the way it was made.
So let the carnage begin.
The main character, Anton, has worked for who knows how long without days off. He finally decides to go on a vacation from Moscow to St. Petersburg. In the 90s, St. Petersburg was not only considered the mobster city, but also a Russian Amsterdam, so it didn't take long for Anton to get totally stoned with God only knows what types of forbidden substances. And it got so bad that Anton literally ended up in the ghetto with his bare ass. I don't want to make this review a retelling of the game's plot. In my opinion, doing this isn't a proper way to review a game. But considering there is no English version of it, I assume somebody would want to know the plot. So I think this time it can be necessary. So in order not to do this right at the very beginning, I slightly skipped the prelude, in which one important event took place in the game, and such events, already within the framework of the review, I will probably directly count today. This event is unmotivated violence, and in the Nuclear Titbit, it sometimes reaches the point of absurdity. Need a VIP pass to a nightclub? Imagine that the person who has it is a Vortigaunt, and you are a famous physicist, Mr. Freeman. By the way, there's a wrench from Opposing Force add-on lying nearby. 1, 2, Mafia's coming for you.
Well, you know, those Russians.
Here, by the way, I must start complaining on the technical side of the game. Well, more precisely, I should have started, but then I found an old interview with the executive director of Nuclear Titbit, Mikhail Spitsin. Technically, the game can be very difficult to play, or more likely to enjoy, due to the fact that the character cannot move freely around the location. The movements that he can make must end with an action. Either you go to another location or take an item, or for example, talk to an NPC. In the case of the game's beginning and the wrench, the object is stupidly invisible due to the character model. And if only this happened in one place, it would be possible not to mention this. But this disease of the game is rehearsal. For example, can you see the toilet paper in the stall behind Anton on this screen? And there is one. The game director explained that every action in the game is a pre-rendered animation. At the time of the release of the first Titbit, the guys had not yet honed their skills in using OpenGL to freely control the character, as it was, for example, implemented in Nuclear Titbit 2.
Yes, there are other Nuclear Titbits, and I don't think that making an episode about sequels is a great idea.
And therefore such unfortunate events can occur in the game. But even with this explanation, I still have a question. Didn't you have testers? Didn't they see this? I'm sure they did. So why didn't you re-render the locations with this bug? Did you care about the gamers at all?
Too many questions, I assume.
So the first unnecessary murder is committed, the protagonist is totally naked, and his vacation has just only started. This is the time the game even starts to make an impression, like it really has a decent plot. Or should I say the character's goal and motivation. Naturally, by the end of the game, everyone will forget about it. But for now, let's take for granted the fact that the authors still thought about the most important thing, and what we have here is not just another do what you want so we can sell it. Anton decides that the damn drug dealers cannot be allowed to poison the respectable citizens of St. Petersburg with the shit that they fed him, and therefore it is necessary to find all those responsible for this matter and beat all the shit out of these motherfuckers. At first, we have to figure out what to do. The homophobic hood guys won't help us for now.
So I think we have to find help somewhere else.
And this is where the real journey begins. The journey no Funcom with their The Longest Journey never dreamed of. And I'm not even talking about the degree of unjustified violence, I'm talking about the surreal stuff happening on the screen. At the same time, I have to admit, the approach by which the degree is raised reveals the fact that the script was written not by some, pardon the expression, imbecile, but by a truly erudite person, pouring out references completely uncommon for video games. How do you, for example, like the leader of the game's Satanists, Fyodor Mikhailovich, who asks not to ask questions to his adept Gerasim due to his disability?
Да не трогай ты Герасима, не мой он.
In the US, they make Easter eggs regarding pop culture. In post-Soviet Russia, we cook Easter eggs of Dostoevsky.
Things you need to do to achieve our final goal in Nuclear Titbit could easily compete with the most irrational Western quests of the 90s. Well, judge for yourself. The door to the basement is closed, which means we need a key. Why do we even have to go to the basement? Well, this is the door, it's closed, and we're playing a point-and-click adventure game, so we just have to. How to find the key? That's right, ask around. There's some stoned old man sitting in a smoke-filled room, probably he knows. How to sober him? Let's just break the window in the room, right? Or there's an alien sitting in the toilet. What the hell is he doing there? What if somebody needs to take a dump? Let's pour a bucket of water on him. Yes, this will end up getting into Asylum, but it was only a matter of time with everything that was happening on the screen, so who cares? On the other hand, there are not so many locations and objects available in the game, and you can figure out everything if you really want to, just by randomly clicking everything everywhere. Fans of the adventure games from the 90s would never be scared away with such nonsense.
But there is one annoying bug in the game. Well, maybe not a bug, but a creator's vision, but a really frustrating one.
At the locations in the game, there are quite a lot of seemingly clickable objects, but when we try to point at them, Anton tells us something like,
Слышь, чувак, у тебя чего, дефицит мозга, что ли?
but after some progress in the plot, it is important to note that this progression isn't in any way connected to neither the locations nor the objects I'm talking about. In the same place, under the same condition, Anton takes the objects. What the hell? Here's an example. There is a sickle in the room with Fyodor Mikhailovich. Let's try to take.
И как ты себе это представляешь?
Just several minutes later, in the same room, I repeat, nothing has changed. And no, the fact that Anton has clothes now doesn't matter. There were other objects he collected naked, no strings attached. Neither the relationship between Anton and Fyodor Mikhailovich, nor any instant need of that sickle we heard in the game about. Nothing. But at that time, it was impossible to take the item, and now it is. Just because I made a little progress in the plot. What kind of nonsense is this? I would even understand if it could be taken only after the Satanists leave the room, as in, they don't look now. Take it. But no. It was impossible because it was impossible. Period.
And this makes you click every object on every screen every time you come back there. And this is really dumb.
To get out from the asylum, you have to f the nurse till exhaustion. I probably won't count this another unnecessary death. She seems to be alive and just sleeping. Then our way leads back to the stoned man to finally get the key to the basement. This is the moment you will face the most awful part of the Nuclear Titbit. The Rasta Game & Watch game. Happy Shiva. You have to get a 100 points in it to proceed. And it's a really tough thing to do, because this game is just random. One time the leaves can fly normally. The other in the way it will be impossible to catch one without missing another. And as in any real Game & Watch game, miss 3 and start all over. Any number of times you need until you'll get 100. Fun fact, I don't know how it was in your Western countries, guys, but here in Russia there was an urban legend about our Russian Electronica Game & Watch clone. They said that if you get 1,000 points in it, the game will play a cartoon. Obviously it wasn't gonna to, but I think that this mini-game is an Easter egg to that urban legend. I could finish it back in the day only after I read in a magazine that there was a cheat code in Nuclear Titbit. Simultaneously pressed 4 keys on the keyboard to instantly get 99 points of 100. This is the place in the game when I didn't understand why Anton played the game instead of kicking the old man's ass to get a key.
Now we have the key and can finally find out what was in that basement.
Welcome to another BDSM site of St. Petersburg. You are mostly welcome. The lyrics of the song playing here, by the way, reads, "Please don't have any dirty thoughts on the things you see. We'll just take some pictures of you here to make you stay forever."
Starting from here, logic exits the room completely. So fasten your seatbelts and enjoy the ride.
To get from the suburbs to the city center, no one will explain you need to go there, by the way. Anton needs a bicycle. A novice serial killer you'll meet on the street has one of these, but as you are in an adventure game, he obviously has a favor to ask. This is another Dostoevsky Easter egg. The guy wants to figure out if he's a trembling creature or whether he has the right, and therefore he needs an axe. Gerasim has the axe, but Fyodor Mikhailovich will let you have it, only if you'll bring him an innocent virgin for a sacrifice. This slutty girl is quite suitable. Having reached the club by bicycle, for some reason we find ourselves in need of a pistol. The player, of course, doesn't receive a single hint about this. To get it, we drive the guard to suicide by drugging him with the same drug that we set ourselves the goal of destroying.
Senseless murder with a wrench, assistance in a human sacrifice, and an incitement to a suicide. What a nice game indeed!
I don't really want to comment on the next actions, but in order for you to understand the degree of madness and stupidness, I'll simply list the following several actions. Cut off the rat's tail with a sickle, pick up a piece of crap, dip it in radioactive waste, mix it all with a pioneer tie previously smeared in sperm and a glass of vodka. And for what? To get an anti-hangover cocktail, you have to give to this person in the club toilet to get a key card from him. Next, omitting some minor points, we blackmailed the owner of the club and also the main distributor of Nuclear Titbit with his photographs of gay orgies with robots. Then we dance in front of him to get a coin with which we can buy a condom. Oh well, yes, and at the same time we're setting the club on fire because the owner doesn't want to be blackmailed. From the conversation overheard before the explosion, we learned the location of the laboratory for the production of Nuclear Titbit. You can get into it through the sewer, but bad luck, the hatch covering the sewer is too heavy. Since we have clothes on now, we can try to ask for help guys from the hood. But they tell us that they are willing to be paid for the job. Where can we get the money? Well, we have a pistol, and the BDSM guys had a familiar-looking suitcase on the sofa in the basement. Yes, 2 more meaningless murders. Meaningless because the BDSM guys were even ready to give us this suitcase themselves. But here's the problem.
Алло, хрен! Я вырос на фильме «Рэмбо».
The final part at the nuclear plant is such a fierce nonsense that there is no point in even describing it. Poisoning the sewer system, turning all of St. Petersburg into zombies because the aliens wanted it that way.
And this is the time I stop counting unnecessary human casualties.
Although, I must admit, the reason for this action sounds reasonable.
Антоха, мне пи***ц! Эти подонки заставляют меня смотреть сериалы Лены ребята и слушать песни группы «Руки вверх». Это чудовищно! Я просто чувствую, как у меня нахуй нейроны отмирают. Я не знаю, чего хотят от тебя эти фашисты, но умоляю, сделай это, или мне конец! Твари!
And after all, the villain is still going to turn the main character into a cyborg. The only thing stopping him from doing it is God. As he is so annoyed by Anton after only 5 minutes with him, he sends him back to Earth so that the woman with purple hair from the beginning of the game can kill everyone. and Anton can defuse the bomb and save the planet.
Злодеи, суперроботы, инопланетные высасыватели мозга – это еще ничего. То ли еще во время белой горячки бывает. Вот у нас один товарищ до сих пор думает, что он бог-внук. Ну как же, есть, говорит, бог-отец, бог-сын, а он вот бог-внук. Такие дела. А тебя мы быстро вылечим, не волнуйся. Ты только это, в следующий раз, когда в Питер приедешь, поаккуратней с водкой.
Well, that explains everything, I figure. Or not.
And this is the Nuclear Titbit. I'm not really sure if there is either in Russian or Western game dev any other game this high, meaningless and offensive. In modern realities, the release of something similar is probably completely impossible, and not only in the West, but here in Russia too. It's also unlikely that such trash with Russian internet humor from the early 2000s will attract at least several dozens of people. So the development of something like this would be of commercial interest to anyone. As a game, Nuclear Titbit is terrible. As a trash piece, the work is memeable and recognizable. But was it even worth remembering nowadays? Please let me know in the comments section below. I've mentioned earlier that there even were sequels to this game later. But to be honest, if the first one is at least a little creative, all the others are just pure shit, not even worth mentioning. Here on Russian Video Game Comrade Show, there are a lot of games it will be much more interesting to talk about. For example, did you know that here in Russia we had our own female Harry Potter, Tanya Grotter? And not only books, she even had a video game of her own, and yes, it also was a point-and-click adventure game. But this is a story for another episode.
Thank you for watching today's episode. I really hope you liked it. Please press thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a nice day. Good luck!